Today is the 29th of January. Another cloudy, dreary day in Chicago with a balmy 34 degrees, which I really shouldn't complain about considering the time of year it is. I want to speak a moment about the impending pandemic that is about to go global. Compliments of our friend, my friend and yours, the Chinese. Unless you've been living under a rock in a cave on an island somewhere, there is a outbreak of a virus called the coronavirus in Wuhan or someplace on mainland China. Let me try to put this in a perspective that the average person can understand. The Chinese government is a communist government. And the Chinese culture, in and as of itself, is kind of a secretive culture. It's all about honor. Saving face and honor. And then you couple that with a communist dictatorship, totalitarianist government, which it is. The young people don't seem to understand that communist governments control every aspect of your life. They have absolute power, absolute authority, and they can pretty much do whatever they want. And communists lie. They lie all the time. Couple that again with that culture of saving face and honor. So they're going to lie. So currently they say there's 6,000 people infected, which is probably a lie. They are going to lie about the amount of people that are infected, and they are not going to know the amount of people that are infected because people are going to go into hiding. China is a vast country, and you're going to have people leaving their cities, spreading that virus, and they're going to be hiding out, being infected, and because nobody wants to be quarantined and subjected to communist medical teams. Let's be honest with this. So, as of today, the UK has stopped flights to mainland China. That's huge. I've never even heard of anything like that in my 55 years of life on Earth. And from what I understand, the State Department in this country is considering the same thing. Don't be surprised if other countries around the world start doing the same thing. Nobody wants to bring this home. Now, supposedly 300 people in China have died, so they're saying. So let's just say 6,000 is actually 20,000 or more. And let's say 300 people dead is actually, I don't even want to say it's double, it's probably quadruple. And why is this? Well, the Chinese, if you've ever been to China, I've never been to China, but I have family members who will never go back because they don't like to be around so many people that you never feel like you're alone. China has got 1.5 billion people. The Earth's population is 8.5 billion people. Think about that. There's close to 2 billion people in India, which is right next door, separated by a mountain range. Think about the impact of a virus like that. And quite honestly, our species is overdue. We are overdue for a epidemic, pandemic, a disease outbreak like any other living creature on this planet. We get to a certain point and disease runs rampant, and how we live as social creatures on top of each other, particularly in urban centers. This is a disaster in the making. And with global travel, back in the old days, you didn't have this issue because people couldn't travel across the globe quickly, and you died before you brought it back home to infect everybody in your own country. Antibiotics will not help you when you have a viral infection. So many people do not understand this. Antibiotics are only good for one thing and one thing only, and that's bacteria. Nothing else. It's not good against parasites. It's not good against protozoans. You cannot take antibiotics for, like, malaria, because the microorganism that causes malaria is a protozoan, single-celled organism like an amoeba or paramecium. If you don't know what that is, I'm not going to give you another science lesson. I'm trying to get you to understand the nature of a virus. There is no single virus on this planet that we have ever cured once you are infected. Not a single one. That's what vaccines are for. Vaccines are basically injections of either what they call an attenuated virus, which is either a dead virus or a weakened virus. And what you do is you take that, stick a needle in you, and it triggers an immune response. And it usually takes up to 2 weeks to work. No matter what you do, any kind of immunization you get against a viral disease, even if you get it into a dog or cat, it takes 2 weeks for your body to develop an immune response to make you immune from catching the disease. So if you've been exposed to it and you get a vaccine, it doesn't mean you're not going to come down with it, because you might already be infected, if that makes any sense. So once you're infected with a viral disease, you have to let it run its course. There's nothing you can do. So let's take something very simple. Let's take chickenpox. Chickenpox is caused by a herpes virus, herpes zoster, I believe. And we have a vaccine for this now, but back when I was a kid, there was no vaccine for that. And what people did is they had chickenpox parties. If a family member or a kid in the neighborhood came down with chickenpox, the mothers would get all their kids together to play with that kid infected with chickenpox. So all the kids would get chickenpox, and you would be immune to it for the rest of your life. That's what people used to do. And chickenpox was never considered a dangerous disease. It was just a minor thing. The whole idea, and I remember it, I was 5 years old when I got it. I remember, and I have a scar here and there from it, because you're not supposed to scratch the scabs. You scratch the scabs, you end up with a scar. Now they have a vaccine for it. And I'm not going to get into this whole anti-vaccine thing versus vaccine thing, because there's merits to both cases of these things. Getting back to this coronavirus, there's no vaccine. They haven't figured out how to. You cannot grow. It's not easy to grow all vaccines. Like the flu vaccine is grown in an egg, is grown in a chicken egg. And this is why when you get it, they ask you if you have allergies to eggs. You can't get the vaccine if it's grown in an egg. They grow in a fertile chicken egg. They grow the virus within that egg, and then they harvest the virus, and they either kill it or weaken it, and they make a vaccine out of it and shoot it into you to trigger an immune response. Not all viruses can be grown. This is why we don't have a vaccine for AIDS. This is why we don't have a vaccine for, well, they never used to have one for hepatitis, but now they got one for, but you can't, not all of them, you can't get vaccines for everything, because the viruses are notoriously difficult to grow, because they use a host cell to reproduce. So now maybe you'll have an understanding. The best way to not get a viral disease is not come in contact with somebody who has the viral disease. And typically how this works, if it is a new virus and a new strain, and an organism does not have an immunity to it, the first time that organism as a population is exposed to it, the infection is usually catastrophic. And like any organism, there's always some people that are immune to it. It works that way, whether it's, if you're talking about cats, bats, dogs, bacteria, human beings, it doesn't matter. In the past, there were viral plagues. And the last really big one that killed like 60-something million people was the Spanish, what they called the Spanish flu, back in the early 1900s, like 1914, 1918, something like that. It killed a huge amount of people. Flu viruses mutate rapidly, and they have the ability to jump species, because every species of animal has a warm-blooded creature has got a flu virus. Whether it's birds, pigs, dogs, and usually these viruses aren't transmissible to other species. They're usually confined to a particular species based on biochemistry. But some have the ability to make a mutation and jump, or they can go to make a jump, like certain types of avian flu can infect a chicken, and it does have the ability to jump to people during a mutation process. And then, since we're not exposed to that particular type of viral agent, it has the ability to just wipe human beings out left and right, because we don't have a natural immunity to that. So, where did this virus come from? Well, there's a couple of thoughts. Because the Chinese, as like the dog eaters, as I call them, they don't have any restraints on anything they eat. There's nothing taboo within their culture about certain things you eat. And our culture is taboo to eat horses, dogs, and cats, because they're considered companion animals. In Hindu culture, you really shouldn't eat any meat, because everything has the possibility. Any living thing has the possibility to be a reincarnated human spirit. So you don't eat anything in strict Hindu culture. But the Chinese, they eat things that they believe is going to give them certain properties that the animal that they ate. Like if you want to be loyal and faithful, you eat dogs. If you want a long life, you eat turtles. And they eat their wildlife into extinction. And where this particular outbreak of this virus happened, there happens to be a very famous open-air market where they are eating every animal known to man. Bats, snakes, whatever. It doesn't matter. Every kind of insect, everything, it doesn't matter. And when you start doing this stuff, you start exposing yourself to viral agents on animals that we really don't know much about. We don't know the bioflora of half the creatures on this planet. And you don't know, and they believe Ebola is like this. Ebola, they believe, jumps from bats to people, but they still aren't sure. And the thing that happens is in these cultures where people eat anything, you have the ability to transmit diseases. And there's a theory that because they eat all these wild animals in these markets, because they don't kill them and they're in baskets, and you can catch a disease from them. So that's one thought. The other thought is the Center for Disease Control, like we have in the United States, they have one of those in China in that area too. And if you do some research online, you can see that there's been labs working around the world with this particular virus. And why do they do these things? Well, they're not supposed to create bioweapons, but we're not supposed to do that, and the Russians aren't supposed to do that, but don't believe 5 minutes of it, because in these secret labs around the world, they're playing that game, regardless if there's treaties or not. And you can bet that the Chinese are playing these games. And the Chinese are notorious for having shitty products, shitty protocol, and there's 1.5 billion of them. Do you think they care if they lose 65 million people? They don't care about their people anyway. When you have that many people, you don't care, and human life is cheap. And they figure it's not going to hurt us to lose 65 million people. Hell, we'll repopulate that in 2 years. Western culture is a little different. Except now with liberals, because, liberals will probably think this is great. But don't be surprised if this was a genetically engineered strain of this virus that somehow escaped out of a lab in China with their crappy security protocols. Don't be surprised. Now, is it going to get here? Well, it already is. There's like 5 people infected that we know of. And as I speak, a whole bunch of, a plane load, like 100 or so more people that are diplomats in the United States have chartered a flight out of that specific area in China and have now landed in California. Now, what are they going to do with them? This virus is supposed to sit in an incubation period for 2 weeks. Are they going to quarantine them for 2 weeks? Or are they just going to keep checking their temperature? And I don't know if when the virus is infectious, maybe it incubates for 2 weeks and you're not infected during that period of time. But when does it show an infection? It's a respiratory virus, which means any kind of cough, any kind of sneeze, you sneeze at 75 miles an hour and you're spraying vapor into the air, and you are sending out millions of viral particles to infect other people. So that's just something to think about. And my thoughts are just this. We as a species are long overdue for a disease outbreak of huge magnitude. It happens with every living creature. It doesn't matter if they're deer, bear, dogs, cats. It happens. So the big question is anybody prepared?